random game pieces. In this example, I want to show you how we can use a class that represents a game piece and put that game piece on a panel and then manipulate the properties of that game piece. So let's take a look and see what it does here. So when the program loads in the constructor, it sort of lays out all of these game pieces, and if I hover over them, I can go ahead and light them up. If I say random colors, it will go ahead and put a random color to the box, and we'll run through a sequence here about 150 times. I want to put random words. Once again, I'll run about 150 times. If I want to put both random colors and words, and if I want to reset my boxes, and then once again, I can go ahead and hover over them. So I have a mouse action going on. If I happen to click a particular box, it goes red. So let's go ahead and walk through the code on this. So let's look at our frame itself. So our frame itself has a control, or it has a JPanel. So we've got a JPanel going on here. We have a JPanel going on in here. We have 4 buttons going on right there, and I have a static label going on right here. So that's what the frame itself looks like. I've got this written basically in 2 classes. I have a frame class, which we're seeing right here, and then we have the game piece class. And the game piece class actually represents our 4 boxes that get put on our panel. So all of the game pieces are represented right there. So let's go ahead and we'll start off by looking at the game piece class. So let's pop on over to the game piece class. Just looking at it here, I want to point out a few things here. The most important one here is that we are extending JComponent. Okay. So JComponent is a fundamental class in which like text boxes, labels, sliders, a lot of those basic controls that we put on a frame get built from and based on JComponent. So it allows us to set things as the location, the X and Y, the height and width, the visibility, the color, the text, all of that fun stuff gets sort of set up in this base class of JComponent. So we've got a few elements going on here. So I've got a base color going on here of white. I have a base property here of strings of letters. Here is our constructor. And our constructor is setting the game piece color, and it's setting the visibility to true. So let's just scroll down a little more. And you can see here we have a paint component, and we have some setters and getters. Let's talk about the setters and getters first, and then we'll look at the paint component. So we've basically have 2 setters and getters going on here. And those are get and set the piece color, and get and set the piece letters. Okay, so we're setting our colors and our letters, and we're returning the different colors and letters back to the main. So we just got 2 setters and getters going on there, basically. The real fun starts under paint component. Let's go ahead and look at the paint component. So a couple things to point out here. This is an override Okay, we are overriding the paint component. You do not get a choice. This is what that actual function is called, paint components graphics G. Okay, can't change it. If you want to manipulate, you want the colors and draw things, that's what you're going to use if you extend JComponent. So we're going to paint component with JComponent. Okay, we have our super. Okay, that allows us to look at the inherited properties or the parent functions. In this case here, paint component. Okay, so now we're going to set up our font, and this font is going to be used for in the boxes. So basically, we're going to say here, font is a Java class, my font, new font. Okay, and the parameters for this is the font. So I'm going to pick Lucida Console. It's usually best when you're just starting out to pick a font that's part of the operating system. I'm picking Lucida Console because it's monospaced and it's part of the operating system. So if I looked in Windows, I'd find Lucida Console. If you're on a Mac or Linux system, you may want to pick a font that's already part of the operating system. I want to make it bold, and I want to make it 18 points high. Okay, now I've got it noted in here that order is everything. So first off, we're going to set the background as black. And then we're going to create a rectangle. Okay, and we're going to start it at coordinate 0, 0, and we're going to make it 100 high and 100 wide. Okay, so we're making a box, a square. Okay, that's black. That's what that step's doing right there. So the whole background of that is black. So we have a black rectangle going on. Okay, so now our next thing to do here is we're going to set another color. We're going to set another color. Okay, and that's going to be our game piece color. And now this is going to be another rectangle here where we're going to go 5 in, 5 deep, 90 wide, 90 deep. Okay, so we're going to set another color. We're going to go in like 5, 5. So we're going to do something like this. And now that inside one's going to be yellow. So this actually, or whatever our game piece color is going to be. Okay, so in this case here, that's that box right there. So we're drawing a box within a box. Then we're going to come back here and reset the color black. Okay, so now the computer's thinking black. Now I can set my font, and that font's going to be black. So what's going to be cool here is now I can just go ahead and throw my font anywhere in there, but I actually want to center it left and right. So I'm going to say that my width, I'm going to create up a little variable here called width. String width, here's our variable here that's holding letters. Okay, and we're going to use the class getFontMatrix, excuse me. So this is going to look at our font, and it's going to say, all right, how big is my string on that? And then we're coming down to this spot right here, where we're going to set the center of this. So basically what happens is this. This gives us the width. Okay, how wide is it? So if I take my width and divide it by 2, okay, then that's going to let me set where the first half of that text is going to be. It's going to allow me to set where my left has to be. So if my text is this long, I'm going to divide it by 2, and then I can set that point right there. So that's what I'm doing here. So I'm going to say basically draw a string, letters, left is going to be that point right there. And then we're going to put it down 60. And that draws the letters. okay, or that draws our game piece. So basically, we create a font, we set our color to black, we draw a black rectangle. Okay, we're going to set to our game piece color. Within now, we're going to set another rectangle. Okay, so this looks like we have a border going around on that. Then we set the color back to font. We set the font, or we set the color back to black. Set the font, find the width, and then draw it right there. So that's our game piece. Cool. So now let's look what's going on in the frame. So let's go over and look at our frame class. Let's go ahead and look at the source in this. So we're extending Java Swing. Let me go ahead here and make this just a tad bigger. Okay, and we got a few things going on in here. So I'm setting up some global variables. So I'm setting up a game piece. So this array list is going to hold our game pieces. That's going to hold our game pieces. So when we copy them to the panel, we'll also make that same reference to the array list. So if I can manipulate in the array list, it will change on our C panel. I'm going to create a array list to hold colors. And you'll notice here I'm holding just colors. Here's my words from my random words. I'm creating a random number generator. And the timer, this is the where all the action takes place, of where we're going to shuffle the colors and shuffle the text. I've got a choice here. So I've got a switch statement that's going to be happening here, and that's going to represent the decisions of the buttons. Let's move down a little farther here. I've got a dimension. So the dimension is basically, I want to make sure that my JPanel is by 400 by 400. Okay. Now, in most of our previous examples, we actually created the action listener within the timer itself. But we can actually pull that out and make it a little cleaner with our code if we wanted to. So I'm actually creating the action listener outside by itself, and then I'm going to use that within the timer. So we have action listener. I'm going to call it my action listener equals new action listener. Okay, within the action listener, I got a few things happening in here. I've got our random choice variable, and I've got a counter, okay, for shuffling. So this is going to keep track of our shuffles, shuffle our colors, shuffle our text, okay. And then let's go down and look at the action performed, because this is where all the fun happens. So what's going to happen here? Well, let me move this down just a bit. Okay, it's not going to follows the same pattern. You're overwriting action performed. So I've got a try statement going on here. So based on the button click, if I'm going to do a random color, okay, so then I'm going to call up my random number generator. We'll call it next in. Here's my color dot size. Okay, and that's going to retrieve the random choice for the random color. So now I'm going to come down here and I'm going to go to my array list. Now this here is actually holding our game pieces. So remember, my OW is holding our game pieces. So what's going to happen then on this is we're going to get, I'm going to call back my random number generator here. So I'm going to call random next int myl.size. Okay, so it's going to randomly pick one of the game pieces. And then you notice our dot operator right here. So that picks up, since we're storing game pieces, and we did this instead it's a game piece, then we get all those properties with that array list. So I can call the set piece color, and now I can get from my color array list, I can get the one that was chosen here. And that's going to randomly set that color. Now we're going to follow the same principle here with the words. Okay, so with the words, we're randomly going to pick a word. Okay, so instead of using size, it's a straight up array, so it's going to be length. Okay, same principle here. My array list.get. Okay, and we're randomly going to get what? We're going to get from my size. We're going to randomly pick one. So this is randomly going to pick a game piece. And then we're going to do set letters, and then we're going to pull that from my words right there. Here's a random choice from here, and we're randomly going to pick a word and put it in there. And then our third option was basically to do random both colors and text. So if you notice here, this here is the exact same code. This here is the exact same code. Be aware that I'm randomly picking. I have to get a new random choice each time on there to sort of give you that sort of shuffled look. Okay? So it's not too bad on here. Just realize that this first part here, that's where we're picking a random color. Here we're picking a random word, but we're doing the array list.get, and then we're going to pick it by a value. So that's what we're doing here. Random next int from size. So it's randomly going to pick one. Either I'm going to set the color, or I'm going to set the letters, set the words. So not much going on really in that. So let's scroll down just a tad here. Okay, I got a catch statement going on. I'm not going to really throw any exceptions on that. Here's my counter. Here's my counter. And I got a this statement going on in here. So I wanted to shuffle it 150 times. So if my counter equals 150, I'm going to call my timer, and I'm going to stop the timer, and then I'm going to reset my counter back to 0. So if I don't put this in here, it's going to run for infinity. Great. So now, let's actually look down here. So if we look at our frame 1, so this right here is our constructor for the frame. Okay, so what am I calling up in here? Creating a new random generator. Okay. I'm setting the relative size to the center, so I'm putting it right there, placing the location in the center. Setting the size, and I'm calling two functions right here. One is the piece setup, and one is the color setup. And then I create a brand new timer. Here's my timer equals new timer. Okay, I am doing this for 40 thousandths, so it's 1 millisecond. So this is 40 milliseconds, and here's my action listener. So most of the time we drop that code from the action listeners right in here, but I wanted to keep my constructor very clean, so that's why I pulled it out and left it right there. So this sort of tells us what's going on when our form instantiates. So let's look at piece setup. So piece setup, we got some things going on here. They're pretty cool and pretty simple. So I have a x and y variable here, and that's going to represent where we put our top left corner for our game pieces on the J panel. I got a for loop going on. Okay, so I want 4 rows that are 4 deep, so it's 16. 4 times 4, 16. That's how I get this number right here. Okay, so here's where I actually create a game piece. So I say game piece. I'm just calling this AA equals new game piece. Okay, so that's where we actually created the game piece. We instantiated the game piece. So like our other controls that we've set before, I need to set a location, which is currently at 0, 0. The size is 100 by 100. I'm going to set it to visible. And I'm going to set the game piece color to black. Okay, so even though we set a color on the actual game piece, when we draw them, that's what the colors are going to be, is whatever color that we'd set, but the top color is going to be black. Okay, so now I'm going to create a mouse listener. I'm going to add a mouse listener to our game piece. So let's take a look what our mouse listener does. So to do that, I'm going to do AA.add mouse listener. Okay, and you're going to hit the left right parens. And then you're going to do something like a control enter on new mouse listener. You're going to do new mouse listener and then control enter, and that will automatically give you all of these guys. So mouse clicked. So remember, clicked is an up and down. Okay, puts the white. Mouse pressed is the downward action. So it's not the up, it's the downward on the press, and that's going to give us red. So the mouse released is white. And when we do a mouse entered, okay, this is when I hovered over it, we went gray. And then when I exit it, it went to white. So I'm just setting colors here just to sort of show us where we're hovering and which one we selected here. I like doing mouse pressed is red. So not a whole lot of code going on in there, but it makes a good effect. Okay, so the real fun stuff, once we've sort of set and added our mouse listener, what we're going to do here, and this is the most important step right in here, we're going to add our game piece to the array list, and we're going to add the same game piece to the control panel, or to the J panel. So we're going to add it to the J panel. So basically what that does is you've got one game piece, but it's got a reference to both where it's at in the array list and on the J panel. So if I change it here, it will also change here. If I change this one in the array list, it will change it right there. So sometimes to be able to change properties of a object on a panel, it's so much easier to drop them into an array list and then choose them from the array list. So next step is I need to move my X over by 100. So here's my first box. I need to move my X over to the second one. I'm going to do 3 and then 4 every time this loops. Okay. Now I want to find a way that every fourth row, or at the end of this one, move my box to here. So if my counter then goes up to 4, and I can use the modulus here. So if I do 4 divided by 4 modulus 4, that's going to equal 0. Then I'm going to move my y coordinate down by 100. And I'm going to set my x back to 0 coordinate. And that should finish out our loop. And then I'm going to repaint our JPanel. Okay, so let me just sort of walk this through here real quick here. For the actual game piece, like I said, we have an X and Y going on. We have an X and Y going on. We have our loop, and this is the loop that adds our pieces to the JPanel. We create a game piece, set the X and Y, the size, the visibility, the color. We add a mouse listener. So what are we going to do on our clicks? And then we finally add that same game piece to the array list and to the JPanel. And then we're going to move the game piece over by 100. And if we get to the last one, we're going to move down by 100 and set our X coordinate back to 0. And then we loop again. So we get our 4. So that's putting our game pieces on the JPanel. All right, the last ones coming out here are really quite simple. So my color setup does just that. I'm adding colors to my array list. I'm just adding colors to my array list. And then what's left is our button clicks. So if we come down to our button clicks, here's our random color. So our choice goes to 1. Choice goes to 1. We start the timer. And this is that choice gets passed in to our switch statement. Here's our X choice. That's part of the switch statement. So then it does that part of the action listener. And I have choice 3. Part of our switch statements in the action listener. And then reset. What am I doing with the reset button? So I'm going to loop through all of my buttons, and I find it easier just to do it through the array list. And I'm going to set the letters. So I'm going to use that setter, and I'm going to set the game piece to yellow. And that is basically it for our random game pieces. So overall, we create a game piece, we add it to the frame, or add it to our JPanel, we add a listener so when we click on it, and then we have a few buttons to make it control it. And the controlling function there is all right there in our switch statement. And that is how you set random game pieces with random colors on our JPanel.